Now then, the NDAs are clear. Transformers Slag could finally talk about it. Let's talk about Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy, Part 1, Siege of the Netflix original series. There's a lot to pick apart here. I watched it once, the whole series, took a bunch of notes, thought about it a bit, watched it a second time, edited my notes a little bit, got a nice little stack of notes here, and we're going to go through it. Now, just an overview, first of all, what did I think? It was very good. It was very good. I liked the darker pace. I liked the older demographic it was aimed at. I liked the animation. It was a lot better than what was done originally through Machinima. It did have its little things here and there, but I will get into that. But overall, a very good series. I like what is going on here. Build upon that. Use that foundation and build upon it more. Look, I love Beast Wars, but Season 1 was clearly them trying to find their place and understand how to work within the parameters of that series. And when we got to Season 2, everything was amazing. So it's the same thing. I'll give it its Season 1 jitters and let those flaws exist and shine, but otherwise a very good start, and hopefully they'll learn from the mistakes from this one, and going into Chapter 2, which will be called Earthrise, those mistakes will be rectified and otherwise. And what are those mistakes really? Well, it's, I have a list of things here that possibly could have been, looked into. Obviously, the writers of the series, Brandon Easton and a few of the others, they've worked on the Transformer brand, but they're not 100% familiar with the lore. They have a good, I would have to say, 70% concept of it while Googling everything, and that it is what it is. Brandon has done stuff with Transformers in the past, and you see the same mistakes that he does that are pretty indicative of people who have a casual knowledge of Transformers. The people that I call, like they say, oh, I'm a fan of Transformers, but they're a fan of Transformers as the average moviegoer is a fan of Star Wars, where they have a general knowledge of it, but when they have to really dive into it from a deeper manner, mistakes do happen due to conflicting information and them just Googling quickly. I will give him a benefit of the doubt because he was working within the limitations of this series. And I'll point out little things here and there. Now, some of the good stuff, like I swear when I was just writing these notes, I was writing them as they were happening. And then during my second viewing, I was kind of going like, okay, we're going to have to rewrite some of these notes because some of it is, you could give them a benefit of the doubt. Good stuff. I love that the opening to the series featured Bumblebee and Wheeljack, kind of a throwback to the original Generation 1 first episode of More Than Meets the Eye Parts 1, 1984. Those are the first two characters we were ever introduced in Transformers, which were Bumblebee and Wheeljack together. So nice little nod and throwback to that, not to mention running against Seekers too, which even adds to that. We get into all kinds of little different things here and there, but I appreciate a mixture of Cybertronian lingo, but also for a lot of different points, stuff kind of falls in. So for every time you got by the Matrix, scrap, or the use of Primus, or even good lines like, don't put your wheels before your chassis, don't get ahead of yourself. You then get Wheeljack saying the word ass, which was just okay, that doesn't really make sense in a 4 million year Cybertronian war with no human connection and no donkeys around. So to have the word ass, I think it was kind of a throwaway line in there. But yeah, again, it's little things that I think that didn't really need to be there, but were there. We get into stuff like, let's see what else I wrote here. Oh yeah, this was an issue across the series, but just I understand that they had a lack of character models to work with, and that they really had to build out the army. They had to pull to those character models over and over. But I felt it almost borderlined on excessive, where it was just like, oh, there's more Sideswipe molds, there's more Ironhide molds, there's more, like Reflector, okay, it's written in the lore that he was kind of an army builder, so that's fine on the Decepticon side, and we have had Seeker Jets of many different colors throughout the lore. But when you get into like, okay, there's Deep Cover, extra Sideswipe, but then there's like 50 other Sideswipe molds, and even in the Sea of Rust there's tons of Sideswipes and Ironhides, and it gets to a point where it was almost excessive. Now I understand the limitations of the budget, and you can only make so many character models to fill out the crew, especially when they're expendable characters or background characters, but I don't know, it just felt like a little much. It really did. And especially when it gets into characters, because you have stuff like Moonracer, where it's like, oh, this is supposed to be Moonracer, but it really just is a seafoam colored Chromia, and they didn't bother with a new head design, where it's like, if you're going to do use the same character model, at least tweak the head design a little bit. Otherwise it's the same character, and considering how close Chromia and Moonracer are in terms of color scheme, and then you have the same character model, one is a teal blue, one is a seafoam green, it'll be confusing for a casual audience. But hey, they killed off Moonracer, so I guess it doesn't really matter, right? Same thing applies for Cliffjumper. They could have gave him his new head sculpt, maybe because he was just a character on a screen for 5 seconds and then kind of disappears. They could have went with his original head sculpt, but I guess maybe it wasn't in the budget. Maybe they didn't want to bother, with making a new character model, maybe because he's not going to be on the arc for the future. Who knows? We don't know who's on that arc right now completely, going into the Earthrise story. And the big one that kind of is like, and this again is targeted at the writers, but using the Sound Blaster character as a separate character. I understand that, like, if you dive into the Dreamwave lore, which is like super obscure, there was like a throwaway panel where Shockwave had a lab with a whole bunch of repaints of different molds, and Sound Blaster technically could have been one of them, but it's never was confirmed that it was Sound Blaster. It could have just been like a Soundwave clone. But here we have a character named Sound Blaster, and it's clearly a case of like, oh, hey, it's a separate character, and it kind of is like, like they could have given it a new head sculpt and called it a different character, but then you could give the argument, well, they wanted to have a character that's based off a toy for trademarking and toy sales and everything like that. I get that, but then you had like characters that were in the toy lines that could have been in that place. Take the character of Spinister, don't put him in the Decepticon ranks, make him be one of those, like, benefactor characters. There's so many others that could have, but again, it's just so much easier, I guess, to just take Soundwave and do the black repaint. So, from a lore perspective, that's kind of, it is what it is. It is what it is. But that's always been kind of the thing, where it's like, when you go through the deepness of the lore, you have the same problem with Mirage, where Mirage, yeah, he has his invisibility ability, but then he also is kind of carrying this ability that's similar to that of Hound, which he's never displayed before, where he's able to create, holograms and clones and stuff like that. Those kind of stuff that falls more into the misgivings and the mistakes of the writers, and how they had a limited knowledge of Transformers, just enough to get by to write a series for Netflix, but not enough to actually go into the nitty-gritty of individual character stuff. And so those things get mixed up everywhere. Characters like Ironhide that had an extremely young-sounding voice. Maybe that's an excuse to make him a gravelly veteran later, but, I mean, I don't see that probably happening. It's stuff like that really kind of makes me go, okay. I did like that they kind of worked in a toy dynamic, which is Impactor and Mirage are sold as a 2-pack, and here they are kind of squabbling amongst each other in the series. Probably was a Hasbro mandate, hey, make sure these two characters have some kind of characterization because they're going to be sold in a 2-pack. Same thing with Ironhide and Prowl, even though it was very brief. They're seen together going outside the arc to fight the Decepticons. They're going to be in the Autobot Alliance 2-pack, so again, probably a mandate by Hasbro. Hey, make sure these two guys have a moment because we're going to be selling them together in a 2-pack. When we get into stuff like, let's say, other toy-related stuff, like the Autobot spoiler box for the Netflix spoiler box with Ultra Magnus, it's kind of one of those things where like, well, what did we really learn from that? Energon cubes, Play-Doh, an Ultra Magnus toy, and a Battlefield rung that didn't appear in the series. So it's something where like that spoiler box didn't really mean much outside of Ultra Magnus is dead. So yeah, he died. Okay. But yeah, that's there was, little things here and there I'm picking apart, but overall, again, it was pretty good. I'd give it like a good 7 out of 10. It's finding its footing. It's finding its place right now, and hopefully when they do the Earth series, humans won't be a major factor in it, which is my biggest concern. But at the same time, again, it was a good start, and hopefully they'll figure it more out as they go around, and they start to go, okay, how do we fix this? How do we fix that? How do we, stay true to those characters? Because this is the thing, especially. I understand it's going to be targeted at a mainstream audience, and your lore might not be important to these writers because they figure, okay, it's more of a broad audience and everything like that. But it's the little things like that too that lead to old, hardcore fans going like, that could have been better. That could have been handled better. There was actually a flub in terms of lines. Ultra Magnus, that was played by Edward Bosco. He had a line which was, I don't know if he was just reading off the page and he didn't realize it. He said, "There is a reason the Matrix choose you." And I was like, don't you mean chose? And I actually played it back twice because I thought I was hearing stuff, but I don't know, maybe he read the line wrong and they just, through editing, it just went through. That was in episode 1, near the beginning when he meets Prime in the Autobot base. But it's, it is what it is. It is what it is. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of good there. And then there's stuff that needs to be improved to make it better. Because I find that as this series progresses, we're going to see what the future of Transformers and animation fiction will be. One thing that I also found interesting was that the series opens with its Netflix anime original series, and I started really paying attention to the lip movement on the characters, and I don't know if it was if what the original language it was intended to be animated in, but there was a lot of moments where the lips weren't really matching the characters. Now, granted, I'm not expecting Beast Wars 1996 level lip synchronization, but I'm really curious, was Japanese the original language? Because, again, unfortunately, what we learned from this, too, at least with the preview screenings for people, we don't have a Japanese language track. So I'm curious how the Japanese language track looks, and if it was maybe originally meant to be a Japanese language track, and then afterwards English was applied to it. I don't know about that, but it's just, it's funny. Netflix anime original series. Makes me wonder about that. Last thing to touch on, same thing, going back to Mirage. I'm just kind of like jumping through my notes here about how Mirage, the way they use the Decepticon kind of thing, kind of a different twist on his questionable allegiance. Instead, it wasn't a questionable allegiance. It was just, hey, he was using a Hound hologram method that wasn't intended for that character to begin with. Little things that I probably would have done differently, but hey, that's just me. What else? Not much else, really. Again, they really got to do something about those character models. That's something where, if you're going to use the same character model, it's like the toys. At least give a new head sculpt. I don't know how much more work it is to kind of just tweak a head a bit and make it look a little different. But stuff like the Sound Blaster was not necessary. You could have used what was the name of the War for Cybertron toy line had a repaint of Reflector that was done in Autobot colors. You could have had him be that Sound Blaster character. We already have the Reflector design running all around that series. Might as well make that Autobot color scheme. It's already a toy. It's already a trademark owned by Hasbro. That could have been that character. I don't think the Sound Blaster character was a good choice. Same thing using Buzzsaw as a part of that. Which has been traditionally one of Soundwave's tape cassettes. I understand why it happened. I just feel that it probably shouldn't have happened. You know, there's other ways that could have gone about that. But that's the flaw when you have writers that kind of go, it'll be a mainstream audience. They won't know. But you know what? Yeah, they won't know. They won't. A lot of audiences went into the Michael Bay movies, and they didn't know much at all, especially in 2007. So whatever was fed to them, they absorbed as fact of an ongoing lore and fiction that existed. And granted, yes, it's apples and oranges I'm comparing, but at the end of the day, you know, you got to respect what has come before. And, you know, try not to twist it too much just to meet your needs, or I hope not, your own ignorance. So that's about it, really. I think there's not much else. The only other thing I think I remember, what else did I write down here? I wrote something about, Optimus Prime's voice. I don't know about that. I don't want to knock on Jake Forshee or whatever his name is, but sometimes it just didn't do it for me, especially when he would yell. That was a voice that really kind of grated with me. Wasn't a big fan of the Optimus Prime voice. Everyone else did a pretty good job, more or less. Kind of dug all the other voices. The Bumblebee voice by Joe Zyja was pretty good. Lindsay Russo, I think it was, for who's Alita 1. She's very good. Really liked all of those. Those were all well done. Even Ultra Magnus, despite, like I said, his weird reading of Choose. Edward Bosco did a good job at Ultra Magnus and Shockwave. Impactor was an interesting twist. I kind of liked that. Different way of handling the character, but because that's a character that's not grounded in too much lore, his origin story kind of changes from depiction to depiction. So if you're not going to have the Wreckers involved, that's one way that one person could have wrote that story. Just kind of not a fan of Ironhide, and it's funny, the two Peter Cullen expected voices, Ironhide and Optimus Prime, could have really been done a little better. Megatron was done good too. Jason Marnocha, I think it is. Jason Marnocha did a good job. All of them were good otherwise. The voice acting was pretty well done. Again, it's the writing that and the characterization that kind of needs to be revisited and handled a little better. And I mean, there was no, like, you know, it kind of sucks that, like, we ruined the Omega Supreme reveal in the trailer. I was assured by the executive producer, that, you know, there would be more twists. Wasn't so much the case. Nothing was really too much of a surprise. So that was kind of, you know, they should have left that out of the trailer. So let that also be a little bit of a lesson. Don't put that stuff in the trailer. You know, kind of have exciting moments for people. You know, those reaction videos on YouTube by fans go a long way for people discovering your media. So try not to take away those reaction moments that could be used. But yeah, that's more or less it. I don't think there's anything else. I'm just reading what I wrote here again. You know, use of the Allspark again as a D20. That's a throwback. You know, an accidental throwback, because Cyberverse kind of started it, being a throwback to the old Generation 1 Japanese comics that used this supercomputer that gave birth to Cybertron, which kind of would become Vector Sigma in a lot of ways, but through the different evolutions became the Allspark through the 2007 movie and everything. But I think that is more or less it. Yeah, so just those character models and the writers, guys, you really gotta kind of like step up your game. Look, if you want, you could contact me. If you need a creative consultant, little things here and there, little things that could potentially be an issue. I understand pride is a big deal with writers and stuff, and I get that. But you don't want to be looked back and people going like, you know, this guy didn't really didn't really know what he was doing. He was kind of just phoning in his job, and you don't want to be known for that. That's something that's going to hurt your resume later when you have to handle other big licenses and series. People get worried about that kind of stuff. But otherwise, again, good stuff. Ratchet, again, I'm just kind of like going through the characters. Ratchet was done well. I can't hate on the voice actors. The voice acting work was very well done, especially through the limitations that they had of the booth voice acting style that they had to go through. That's always very hard to kind of do good proper characterization among other characters, but they did a very good job through the limitations they had. So at least a hat off to about 99% of the voice actors. They did a pretty good job. And the runtime, I mean, at the end of the day, they're 21-minute episodes, but when you take out the credits, which are about a minute and a half, they're 20-minute episodes more or less. And considering there's 6 of them, that gives you 2 hours runtime overall. It's a TV movie. You know what I mean? It wasn't the grand epic scale of, like, let's say, like if this was turned into a movie, I don't think it would pass as a theatrical movie, but it could definitely pass as a TV movie or a made-for-DVD kind of movie thing. It's a short Michael Bay movie. Actually, I wouldn't want to compare it to Michael Bay movies. That would actually be a little bit insulting, but it's a short movie. It's a short movie at the end of the day. It's something you could easily burn through. No problem. It has a good pace. Doesn't really get boring at any point. Primarily because I think they probably had to fit quite a bit of story within those 6 episodes. So the pace was really quick. They had to tell a lot of story very quickly. Not a lot of time to create character development except for minor things here and there. Fleshing out the Bumblebee character, fleshing out Jetfire's, his character development, his growth, his hero's journey, if you will. And setting up that whole original 1985, search for Alpha Trion explanation of Elita 1 being, her staying behind, or at least in the original, being left behind on Cybertron to fend for herself while Optimus is off doing his space journey. So that kind of throwback to, again, stuff that pulls from the original lore. If you watch one episode, or if you when you look at Alita's history, that pretty much that's the primary focus of it. So a quick Google search would have brought that up very quickly. But otherwise, everything's pretty good. Again, good 7 out of 10. Don't hate it. Don't hate it at all. And I feel that there's a lot to improve here, and it's just one of those things that with that improvement, a better series could come from it that could get an 8, 9, or a 10 out of 10. In the same way that I looked at Beast Wars, and Beast Wars Season 1 had its flaws, but it was also trying to find itself. So when you're being compared to the greatest Transformer series of all time, you're off to a good start. So hopefully Earthrise will have those same kind of learning experiences, much like Beast Wars did. Now they know their cast. Now they know what they're working with. You could grow from that and create more. Obviously, there will be the conflicts of Hasbro saying, well, you got to use this product or this toy or this character. But at the end of the day, a good story could still be told. And hopefully, we get to a point where we can look back on the War for Cybertron trilogy and go, this was like a top 3 Transformer series. And dive more into the stuff that Transformer fans love, which is lore, characterization, relationships, and most importantly, a good balance of action and explosions. Good balance. But that's it more or less. That's my take. Let me know what you thought about the War for Cybertron trilogy. But it's a good start. It's a very good start, and I'm very curious to see where we go from here. And hopefully the producers, the writers, and everything use this as a learning experience to grow something even bigger than what they've already started with.